Okay, this morning we're going to start covering the vertical stabilizer and the rudder for our Mark III Extra. We've already taken these parts and cleaned them up. A little Scotch-Brite work on them, MEK, cleaned them up, got them all shining, ready to go. Shaking all the loose metal shavings out from all of our drilling process in the quick build. And we're going to start sealing these parts up and doing some anti-chafe tape, getting them ready for fabric. Alright, this morning we're going to start covering our rudder and our vertical stabilizer. We've already cleaned all these pieces, so we're pretty much ready to get started. I've already got a lot of this done on the caulking. I just use regular acrylic latex painter's caulk, and what I do is I like to seal any tubes that are open to the inside of the fabric. And what that does for us is if there's any metal shavings inside of there, they don't end up inside your fabric when you're done. So what we do is we come through with our painter's caulk and we just put a little dab in the end of each one of the open tubes up here in the top of the rudder where the shavings can get out after you drill and rivet all of your hinges in place. All those shavings will end up inside your airplane, and we don't like that, so we keep them contained. So every little tube, like this one right here, we just take our painter's caulk and just stick the tip right in, just get a nice small hole in it. Just caulk that in just like that. Just seal the ends of those open tubes, keep those from wicking shavings down in there. And once we get that part all done, like I say, I've already got all these taken care of across here. We'll do a little piece of this vertical right quick. We take our vertical stabilizer. Again, we've already cleaned and Scotch-Brited these parts. On the Mark III Extra, there's some fabric rivets in the vertical stabilizer and the horizontal stabilizer, and we've already pre-drilled those holes in this rivet area. There's just 4 rivets in the top on each side that hold our fabric in place, and we'll see more about that later. But we'll take these little parts right here. Any place that there's a tube, especially where you're going to be drilling and hinging, we want to seal these tubes in. So I just take a little painter's caulk, just squeeze it right in the front of that tube right there. Wipe that down. And just hit that on both sides. That way those shavings can't get back up in our fabric. Just lightly, and you want to clean that off so that it doesn't get up into your covered area. And I think that's about got this one taken care of. We've already gone through most of it, so that should have those taken care of. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to take our anti-chafe tape. This is also supplied by Poly Fiber, and we'll start taping off our gussets. Any place that we have a tube that's going to protrude into our fabric, we want to get just a little bit of tape around that and just protect those areas to keep the fabric from tearing through. So let's go ahead and get started on our taping. Okay, we've got our rudder prepped up. We're ready to do some anti-chafe taping. I just usually get me about a 2-foot piece off of my roll to get started with. And what I do is bring it right back to the edge of the crimped end of the tube. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap these all the way around the front, just like this, and just estimate how far that'll take to get to cover the other side. Once you get a rough length on that, you just go ahead and stick those down across the front. I generally just run all the way across this side with these while I'm going. from one end to the other. And what we're going to do, we're just going to hold this tape down on that rivet head and just pull it tight to the other side. Go ahead and stick that down. This tape doesn't like to stick real well when it's kind of damp outside, which it is today. But even when it's warm, I generally come along behind my tape with my little shoe iron and I heat that tape up and it sticks a lot better. Take the shoe iron, get it set for about 300 degrees, and I just go ahead and heat that glue up along the front surface to make that stay put. And this tape that we're putting on here will protect that fabric from the sharp edges of the tubes. And I just grab the back two corners and just stretch it around the side just like that. Stretch it around the side. Stretch it around the side. Then get our shoe iron again. Come right in and just heat that right to the side of that tube. That way that'll stay put and not wrinkle up under the fabric as you're trying to cover. Now once your fabric's on there, of course this will never be able to move again. But if it moves while you're covering, it's really difficult to get back under there and fix it. So we just heat those up like that. This moves along pretty quick. You can generally take one of these off in about 20 minutes and get it ready to go. We're going to go ahead and flip over and show you how to get the back edges of these. Trailing edge is done the same way as the front. We're just going to take our tape and just run it right over the edge like that. Get a good estimate of where that needs to go to. Just about right there. And I'm just rolling this around to the inside edge, not all the way through to where it sticks out the top of your fabric. Where it shows, it makes for a nice neat line. Just like that. And of course we would just continue this all the way to the other end. So then we take our iron and go ahead and heat those into place so that they'll stay put. That gets that glue on that tape really nice and heated up where it stays put for us. Okay, we've got a good start on that. Now we'll just flip this over. And we'll just go ahead and trim these off to the right length to where they land right at the back edge of the crimp in your tube. Those all look pretty good. Now we've already heated this up on the front, so this tape is stuck pretty good. Then you can just take these tails again, just give them a pull around like that, just press them into place. Pull them around, press them in. Around, press them in there. And let's hold them down into place and go ahead and run a shoe iron right along the side of them. Right around the nose, down the side. And it's best to try and do that without any wrinkles in it if you can. It will show in the fabric. So the neater you do your tape, the neater your finished product ends up. So now we've already wrapped these tapes around the inside edge. Now we're just going to go ahead and check and see if we're at the right length on all of these. Trim them off. If not, these are all good. So same thing again, just pull the tails up, just like that, stick them around the edge. Tails up, stick them around the edge. I'm pulling quite a bit of pressure on these. Go ahead and get them to stretch around the shape of that end of that tube, and then just go ahead and feed them right on in. Make them stay put for us. Just like that. Just like that. Now on the bottom side of this, we end up with some little tails sticking up in here. If you try and fold those over, it'll tend to want to wrinkle up on these inside edges. So it's just best just to leave those just like that. They're not gonna hurt anything. They're not beyond the edge of the tube where the fabric's gonna lay. So that's how you get those leading edges taped in, just like that. Any place that your fabric's going to chafe on something, you want to get it taped. So on the edge where we've done our 45-degree braces in here, you got 2 rivets sitting on the top. So we'll take these, just tape them around just like that. That protects the end of that tube right there from getting into the fabric. Around the inside. Again, I just always go back behind myself and go ahead and put a little heat on it. Make that stay put, or you'll spend your whole covering day chasing pieces of tape. So we'll do that all the way down. All the way down all of these edges. We'll put a little piece of tape around the top edge there. We'll tape this bottom piece right here, and that'll have our rudder taped up. Now we'll go ahead and switch off from the rudder right now and just switch right on over to the vertical stabilizer, and I'll show you how to tape some of that. Now the vertical stabilizer and the horizontal stabilizers have flat gussets on them, and they have sharp edges here. Now I clean mine fairly well, so they're not bad, but I still do the anti-chafe tape on them. So on this one, I just pull myself a little length of tape out. I usually just let my tape lay over the edge of this gusset just about 1/4 inch. Let it run loosely to the front. Just press it in. And I just cut these off kind of wild. Again, over about 1/4 inch, just like that. Looks like a charm, baby. And then just a little off that edge right there, and you can see I'm just lapped over about 1/4 inch on the front of that, and I'm just going to let that lay there, the finished product. Then I come back and I just trim that tape off in line with the other tapes that I'm just using them for a reference for a straight line. Go ahead and trim them off in line with your other piece of tape that you've got there. Then we just come through and trim our corners off. A little 45-degree angle across through there. Then we can just go ahead and start pressing that tape into where it goes. And that just protects the edge of your fabric where it goes over the edge of that gusset. Down just like that. Then we'll do the same thing with our shoe iron again. We'll just heat those edges up so they don't roll up on us. Around through there, and around through there. And again, we just leave this piece just hanging off there. If you try and fold it under, it'll start to wrinkle up the edges. Best just to leave it flat just like that. And that's the way I do all the gussets everywhere. Everywhere that there's a gusset, I do the same thing. And on the vertical stabilizer and the horizontal stabilizers, these are close to flush to the top surface for our fabric reinforcing tube that comes through the center. So I go ahead and take those off also. I don't worry about running them all the way to the edge because they're not sharp. Just run them in about like that. Again, just hanging off the edge, about a 1/4 inch or so. Trim those up kind of neat. Press those right in. Tape's doing real well. We won't worry about putting an iron on that. Just run that right on around the edge, just like that. And I'll do the same tape on these gussets and on these, and you'll see those when we come back. I'm going to go ahead and tape the rest of this off, tape the rest of the rudder off, and we'll be ready to start getting some glue on these parts and getting some fabric out. All right, we've got our pieces taped off, and we're ready to go ahead and put a glue coat on these. Get ready to start putting some fabric on them. We'll start out with our rudder. Got my glue mixed up. Got it not quite as thin as we were working with our fuselage because we're going to put this base coat down and get it nice and thick underneath our surface. So the way we're going to cover this is we're going to take one piece of fabric. We're going to start it on this edge. We're going to wrap it all the way around the trailing edge so that we don't have a seam on the back edge of the rudder. So we're going to glue the leading edge all the way across for our glue seam. We're going to glue all the way around the top because we'll have a seam around here. We'll glue all the way across both sides of the bottom up to about right here. So when our fabric comes around, it'll join right in there. We'll start gluing it. Got to put just a little bit of extra glue on these taped areas because it soaks the glue up. We want to get a good bed for our fabric. Gluing just right along the leading edge, keeping it nice and smooth. We'll go back and make sure we don't have any runs anywhere. This edge right here, it's going to glue right around the whole thing. We're going to have to wrap that fabric to the inside to get plenty of lap. Check ourselves for any runs anywhere. Make sure everything's laying nice and neat. Do our bottom edge. Around about right there. We're around the inside edge of that. Missing a couple of pieces of tape here. I can see I'm going to put a piece of tape around this piece here, and we're going to put a little piece of tape right around this top edge right here, just to make sure that that doesn't cut into the fabric. Here I've added a couple of pieces of tape there that we noticed we were missing when we started gluing. Stay ahead of ourselves. Right here along the top. Then we'll go ahead and glue our vertical stabilizer. And our vertical stabilizer, we're going to cover the top half with one piece of fabric that starts right here and wraps all the way around the leading edge. So what we want to do is not start with our fabric grain in a direction this way, or when we run around the other direction the fabric will be running off at an angle. So I usually start with my fabric weave running the direction of my leading edge. So to get my measurement for my fabric, I would just measure from this point to this point and double that, and that would be enough to wrap back to here, wrap all the way around the front. The weave on both sides of the fabric will be running the same direction that way. We'll do the same thing down here on the bottom. We're going to start our fabric here and wrap it around the other side. We're going to actually start our fabric on the side that has the hinges, on the opposite side that has the hinges. So we'll start our fabric over here, we'll wrap around that way. That way our finished seam is over here on this edge and mostly concealed by the hinges that'll be riveted in later. So any place that you've put some anti-chafe tape over that covers up the hole where your hinge lines up, it's best to go ahead and take a soldering iron and just burn that hole out so that you can find that after you're done. So we'll go ahead and start out gluing. We won't have to put any glue on our leading edge at all because we're going to do all of our seaming back here and down here. Same on the bottom. We'll be gluing this edge and this edge. We'll just run a neat line right down through there. Finish it up on the opposite side. Glue right down this edge. Finish it up on the back side. Then we'll go ahead and glue this spot in here, and we're going to wrap our fabric right around there, and we're going to end our fabric right there. Then we'll put just a little bit of glue right here because we're going to have a seam of our fabric's going to come and wrap over this edge, but it's going to have to flange up onto that just a little bit. Onto your tail post ring. Put a little bit right there. And glue this. Glue this back post up. Same thing again. We'll ring right around through there. Fabric's running through. A little ring around the tail wheel rod right there. And of course the fabric will wrap over this, so we don't need to glue this edge. We just need to glue this edge and this edge. A little bit of seam around the front there. a little bit around the tip right there where we're going to do a little bit of a lap seam. And that has us glued off on the rudder and the vertical stabilizer. We'll go ahead and let that set up. Let the glue drips on the table dry, and I'm going to go ahead and roll my fabric out and start cutting some pieces for these. Okay, I've rolled my fabric out across the table, and I'm going to try and figure out the best way to use my fabric and get the most out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my rudder to where the trailing edge is even with the weave of the fabric. Then I'll wrap this other side over it until I get the distance that I need to be able to lap to the other side with this. I need just a little bit more, and that's got us covered right there. I can get all the way around the other edge, so I can just lay that on back. Then I can get my pencil, and I'm going to want to get enough fabric here to lap back up over this edge, so I should be able to come right along that line right through there. Continue that right on out. And get our scissors and just go ahead and just cut that piece of fabric right out through there. Just like that. Then I'll lap this fabric back over, and just so I can remember which piece of fabric does what. Go ahead and just give that a rough trim across through there, just so I can remember what piece of fabric does what. I'll take my pencil, because I'm generally cutting my fabric as I'm going through my roll. I'll pre-cut all of my fabric for each piece and set it off to the side. But I know that I want this edge to be down here. That'll make all that straight. So I can just take this fabric and just whatever label works for you. I usually use an A on one piece, and then mark it in the same spot on your tube. And then when you get ready to lay your fabric back in, you should be able to just lay your mark, your star, your check, whatever you use, over that same spot, and you'll know that's the direction that you plan to use that fabric. So that piece is ready for our rudder. Set it off to the side. Okay, we've cut our piece of fabric for our rudder, and we labeled it so we know which one it is. We're going to take our vertical stabilizer now, and we've cut our fabric at a little bit of an angle, so we're going to take advantage of the depth that we got right there just to save a few inches of fabric. And we want our vertical stabilizer to lay in line with the weave of the fabric, so that the weave as we wrap it, runs the same direction on both sides. So we've pulled this vertical stabilizer down to where we're close to this edge to get as deep into that depth as we can get. And we know we're straight in line with the weave of our fabric. We can go ahead and take our pencil and draw a rough line of where we believe we're going to end up. Then we can just take our vertical stabilizer and just roll it straight over on the fabric. That. Then we can draw our line out over here. leaving plenty of room for our lap. We should have plenty of fabric, so we're not real concerned about it. Right up through here, right there. We'll take our vertical off there and set it off to the side. Go ahead and cut that piece out. We'll get our pencil line on this so we can tell where we were at. Cut that out like that. Trim our last little trim right here.
No.
All this fabric back to the side. We're just going to work on these two pieces right now, so we can just go ahead and put our roll of fabric off to the side. We got enough room to lap up and over. Pull our fabric back. And we can see we've got plenty of room down here. Got plenty of lap here, got plenty of lap on the back, got plenty of lap everywhere. And so we don't have to look for that again. We'll go ahead and pick a corner. Sometimes you can even get right up here in the plate. Put in a B. Put the same label on your fabric. Come right over here. Put a C in there. And put the same label on our fabric. That way when we come back to line this fabric up, we know exactly how we plan to cut it. And it'll fall right back into place for us. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get set up. I think we'll just start with this vertical stabilizer, and then we'll cut another little piece for this when we get down to there. We're going to start on this piece right here. Okay, we've cut our fabric for our rudder and our vertical stabilizer, and we've labeled them with a couple of marks. So what we're going to do is we want to start out on all of our parts. We want to start out on what would be the bottom side. On the vertical, it'll just be one side or the other. On the horizontal stabilizer, we'd start on the bottom, and then those seams would be, the final seam would be covered by the hinge mostly, and it would be on the bottom of the airplane. On the vertical stabilizer, we're just starting on the side that's drilled for the hinges. You can see your drill marks right in there where we already had those pre-aligned. So we're gonna start wrapping on this side. Then when we bring our fabric around, our final seam will end up right here at the hinge line. So we'll take our piece of fabric that we cut for our vertical. We'll lay it into place. We made a couple of labels. We got our little B right here, and we've got the B on our fabric. And then on the other side, we've got the C mark. If we line those up right over top of each other, we know that when we wrap that other side around, it's got plenty of room because we'd already preset that up. So we should be ready to roll with this. So the first thing we want to do is we just want to establish a starting point, which the first thing to do is you take your little MEK rag, the same cup we used earlier, just a little cup of MEK, rag soaked in it. And we'll just figure out where we want to start. We'll just go ahead and start right there. Now we've already got a bed of glue underneath, so that'll dry up and stick, tack itself into place. We'll let that dry just a little bit. Then we'll just go ahead and run just a little line of glue down that just to hold that in place. Go ahead and rub that in, just like that. Okay, we've got our little glue line right here. We've got this fabric established where we want it to run. So we kind of just get everything lined out. We know we're going to have to make a little cut right here, so we'll pull a little tension in this. Dry our glue brush out just a little bit. And we'll just go ahead and glue an anti-fray line right through there. So we have that established. We're also going to cut a little line right through there. Like that. So we'll let that set up for just a moment. Make a couple little cuts on that. So we'll cut right through here. Just like that. Not quite dry enough yet. Got a couple more seconds. Okay, we'll pull a little tension on that so we know where that's going to go. We'll lay our scissors right on the edge of that tail post ring. And we'll cut that right through there. Just like that. Then we're going to cut across where we're going to have that lap come up. We'll cut that straight down into there. We'll just cut that on out of the way. And now we got a pretty good idea where we're heading here, so we're going to go ahead and just fold this back. Just going to put a little fresh glue right in here, right up on that, right across there. And we'll pull our fabric back in, lay it in there where we like it, just like that. Everything kind of going in the right direction. And then we'll come back through and we'll just tack that right into place there. And go ahead and glue that well up to that ring. And right down through there. And we're going to just go ahead and we'll go ahead and let that set up pretty good, and then we'll go ahead and start stretching around the edge. Tack this into place right here. We're tacked right here, so our corner's good and established. We'll go ahead and get our MEK rag, and we'll just pull a little tension up on this to where it doesn't have any wrinkles, and we're just going to stick this just on this back edge right here. Just like that. Just run it all the way to the leading edge. Just like that. Just stick that right down. You can see the way that glue soaks in there. And it wakes, the MEK soaks in and it wakes that glue up in the back and it sticks it right into place. And we're going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to pull this over just a little bit. And I'm just going to run this line right down through here. All the way up to the top. Just like that. Before I start setting up, you can do a little adjustment if you feel you need it. Come right over it again. Just like that. Now what we're going to do at that point, once that starts to set up just a little bit, we're going to come back through and we're just going to run a little glue line down each one of those so that they stay put in place. And we'll move on to the next step. I'll get a little bit of glue on my brush. And I'm not trying to glue everything all the way around right at this moment. I'm just running a line to the leading edge, just so that we know that that'll stay there real well for us. We'll do the same thing down this line here, all the way up to the front, all the way back to here. And at this point, we can see we're already starting to get a covered surface happening. So I'm going to do just a little bit of trimming right here because I know I got to come around the edge. We've already done glue lines on these, so I'm gonna cut this right in front of that little 45-degree flange right there, so that that'll wrap right around to the inside. Then we'll go ahead and trim that on up so it doesn't wrinkle or roll, just like that. And this right here, we're going to do a little relief cut right through there so that this can just lay right down in that hole. So we'll go ahead and add a little glue in there. Pick that up with your brush or your finger. Get it out of the way. Since we've already got a coat of glue on that, your glue will not soak through it any longer, so you have to go ahead and get underneath it and get that glued down and just tamp it right into place. Just like that. And this right here, you can just go ahead and glue that little tab from underneath and just wrap it right around, right to the inside. Then we'll go ahead and do the same thing right here on this. I'm going to run my brush up underneath it, get some glue under there, and just go ahead and pull a little tension on that. Get that glue nice and solid all around through there. Just like that. You know, on this top corner right here, I want to go ahead and get that stuck into place on that tip. So I'm just going to go ahead and just brush right through it with some glue. And then we'll get that to try and stay back into place. A little tension on it. A little tension back that way. And we'll just hang on to that until that sets up. Okay, we've got this side all tacked down, front and back. We just finished up this little back edge. And I went ahead and grabbed a piece of the scrap fabric we cut off when we were cutting out the angles for the vertical stabilizer. And I have done a pre-glue on that. So I'm just going to take my pencil, just going to get a rough mark where I'd like to cut that at. Right back through here. I'm going to get my scissors and cut all that out. That. Put that one right through there. And then we'll just go ahead and, again like we did on the top side with our MEK rag, we'll just establish our starting point here, just like that.
How's the weather out there? Oh, it's cold. Yeah, you know.
Is everybody done?
Yeah.
Okay. So we established that spot right there. And we're ready to go ahead and pick this up and go ahead and glue this down along this edge here. Just add a little glue right in here. Right in there. Glue that through there. Tab down. We'll just go ahead and glue this one from underneath, and we'll just go ahead and wrap that right onto the top while we're right there and thinking about it. Wrap that right to the other side, just finishing right off the inside edge. Just like that. Then we can, and then we're going to have to do a little cut right there. Cutting it around that back edge. So we'll get that pre-glued. While we're waiting on that, we'll get our MEK rag. And we'll go ahead and get a straight line here. And just run that right to the front there. Just like that. Then we'll go ahead and run a little line of glue down that. Make sure that stays put. And we'll rub that in. Our glue's had time to set up here, so we'll go ahead and cut into there. Cut that back to there. Get rid of that. Go ahead and act like we know what we're doing and just glue that right on down right there. Glue this right around through here. Keep all that glue set up. We're ready to flip this guy over. Let your fabric flap right out from the sides, out of the way. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and finish this stuff off to the inside. We don't have to get real particular with this edge. The only thing we want to do is make sure that it gets beyond the apex of the tube where your fabric's going to drape back to the other side, because you'll see that cut if you don't. So we're just going to start right here. I'm going to cut a neat line across here because that's going to lay on that gusset. And then we just go a little bit long to the inside. Got a little tube right there, so we'll cut back and around that, on down to the other end. We'll do a cut right there. That one's going to lap in there just fine. Do the same thing here. Cut that to the inside. Do a little relief cut right there. One right there. One around this tube here. That'll get that, where all that'll lay to the inside. And we'll do the same thing across these. So we get a nice lap along that. And we don't want to go too far on that one because we're going to need fabric to wrap around the other side of that. So we're going to lap this one in. Do the same thing there. Relief cut there. Right on out to the end. Then we can just go ahead and take our glue. We'll run a little edge up 16, 18 inches long, wrap right around the inside, go ahead and glue that edge. We'll just go ahead and wrap that right on in there. Just like that. Pull out any little wrinkles. Glue that right around to the inside edge, just like that. You also want to be careful while you're doing this that your fabric doesn't go so far that it touches the top surface of the vertical stabilizer or the other surface. Just kind of work that stuff as you go. And get all your wrinkles out. Just wrap it right to the inside edge. Smooth that out. Get a little excess glue there like I do. And get your MEK rag. Just go ahead and clean that up just a little bit. Now we can take our MEK rag and we can go ahead and start this process in with it. We didn't glue around to the inside edge, so we can only just stick it to the back edge there. But then we can just come and brush right through that. Just like that. Just go ahead and glue right along that back edge. And right here where we're lapped over this gusset out here on this outside edge, just go ahead and lay a little layer of glue back up in here. Go ahead and lay that right on over. Get that where it's laying down nice and neat like that. If you can see that piece. Get that laying down in here. And I'm just going to hang on to that for a moment right there and let that go ahead and set up. We're going to do this same lap to the inside, down on the bottom of the vertical stabilizer and both of your boom tube supports on the front edge of the vertical stabilizer here and here. And then I'll show you how to finish out this tip up here. Okay, I've gone and glued all this around to the inside edges, all along all of these edges here, all the way across your gussets up on the sides and right here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our glue, our poly tack. We're going to just come to this tip right here, and we're just going to pre-glue that right around to the other side just to keep that from fraying. We'll go around and do the same thing on this tip, around to the inside. Same thing on this one right here. Okay, we're going to let that set up for just a moment. And then what we're going to do is come through and trim these back to the point where it'll fold and conceal itself, which would be about right there on the opposite side. So we just want to just leave an 1/8 to 1/4 inch around those tips so that we can just kind of iron those around with our shoe iron. I'm going to cut that right around through there. We'll cut it around through here, right up to the apex of the other tube. That way our fabric's relieved to do its lap around this way. So we'll just finish that off with a shoe iron and knock those around. I'm going to do the same out here on the other end. Right up to the apex of that tube. Like that. Trim that little guy out. This is still pretty tacky, so we're going to give it just another couple of seconds. Then we'll take our shoe iron. And we want to be careful when we're doing this not to get into the piece of fabric that we didn't cut. And you can see that I've cut right down to that apex right here so that when this fabric wraps around it'll be neat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold that out of my way. And I'm just going to start ironing right along that edge. Just like that. And I'm going to wrap this fabric around the top side of that tube. Shrinking it out as I go. Got my iron set all the way up at 350 degrees because the tubing's cold, so it'll take a little bit longer to shrink that fabric, so you want to go ahead and get some good temperature on it. So we're just going to iron that right around like that. Around the back edge. And then when we get done with that, when we pull this fabric over the top, it'll have its lap to the top edge, and this will have enough fabric all the way around through here to trim that edge and finish this out on this side. So I'm going to do the same down here.
Alright.
Holding that out of the way. Just iron this right up to the top surface. You're just fine, Trav.
You used to find the blind. Candy is a candy.
We're still on now. Oh. And we'll just iron that right up through here. Just like that. Let's go ahead and heat some of that slack out of there. Just like that. Do the same over here. Around through there and just get everything kind of tucked in there nice and neat. Okay. Now that's got us ready. We've got our end sealed. We've got everything wrapped around all of our points. So we're ready to pull our fabric back and start wrapping to the top edge and around to here. So the first thing we'll want to do is get our pencil. Just pull back a little tension on that. Figure out where we want that cut to be. It'll be right up through here. Right up along the edge of that. Gonna want about a 1/2 inch lap onto the tail post ring. We'll cut right there and right there. We can also see we're going to need to do a cut right through here. And then we'll go ahead and trim this back also while we're there. Okay, I've glued these edges right in here. And I went ahead and snipped them all into shape so that they fit around this tail post ring right here. I'm going to go ahead and glue this little section and go ahead and stick those into place. Right back to there. Just go ahead and get a little glue on that, make sure everything stays where I put it. And then we'll get my scissors. I'm going to do a little cut right here. I'm going to cut this across that 45-degree angle there. I'm holding tension with this finger right here to make sure that stays put. And I'm just going to go ahead and wrap that right around there a little ways. And that's got everything tacked over to where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and hang on to this for a moment, let that set up, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and start wrapping around to the other side. Looks like it's holding pretty good. Okay, I've come through and I've glued this area and I've let that set up a little bit so that we can not let our fabric move around anywhere. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this edge over and I'm just going to tack it with my MEK rag right along this back edge. Just start right in there. Let that set up a little bit. We'll just keep working our way forward. Just like that. Work that all the way up to the tip. Right on up to there. And I'm hanging on to this so that keeps a nice contour over the edge. And I'm just going to hold that down until that glue starts to set up right there. You can see that starting to dry. Starts to get a little bit wider. I just want to hang on to that just for a moment and let that get good and set up. Feels like it's got us there. Then we'll come back in with our poly tack. We don't want to glue this all the way over to the top edge because we want to get this glued and iron all of the inside surface so that when we lap to our other side, we don't have any loose fabric to deal with. So we'll just do a nice little line right down through here. You don't want to run that over the inside edge, just right down the side of it and go and get that glued well. See that poly tack soaking in there, turning the surface dark. It means it's penetrating well. And right up here on this tip, we can just go ahead and glue that top edge right around through here. That way we can come back later and trim this around and go ahead and do a finished seam right there. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing that I did right here. I'm going to do it down this side, get it to the same stage as that. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap this fabric here, and I'm going to mark it and tack this in the same manner that we did the other side and go ahead and get ready to start finishing out this bottom side too. Okay, I've tacked my fabric down all along this back edge with actual poly tack. I've tacked it all the way across this edge and all the way across this edge. I've got my iron set for 250 degrees, and we're going to come through and we're just going to tension this fabric so that we can get, when we wrap to the other side, we know that we've got all of our tension off of that wrap. So we'll just go ahead and start right in here. We'll just go ahead and shrink that up. Tension down to there. Do the same thing over here. See that fabric drawn in. We're not trying to finish iron this or anything, we're just getting some tension on it so that it'll pull that tight on the other side. We'll get up here on our leading edge and see we got a little wrinkle starting to form right in there. So what we'll do is we'll start ironing this edge down in here and start pulling that down to us. You have to leave that iron on that tubing just a little bit longer than you do on the open surface. So it's actually going to heat that tube up for the fabric to come up to temperature. Pull a little bit of that down. Start working it down. out. Going around to the other side. Just like that. Tension around across here. Just lightly iron everything in here. Then we can flip this over. You can see what we're trying to do is get this edge to pull tight so we have a good clean seam. Same thing with the bottom part of our vertical. Alright, we got that ironed out. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get ourselves a piece of half by half angle that I use to mark my lines with. We'll roll those over to where we think we want them to land, and we're going to do a finished cut seam on that. Okay, we've got our pencil, little piece of half by half angle we use for a straight edge. We're going to try to determine where we want to cut this at. Usually I want to go just beyond the rivet line so I can look through here and I can see my rivet hole. I can see it right here. So I'm going to lay this straight edge in, kind of roll it up toward there to put a little tension on that fabric, and just draw a nice neat line right there, like that. And we'll work our way right to the other end of the trailing edge of the vertical. And that gives us a line to cut. I've already done this one right here. I want to go ahead and run a little line of glue across that to keep that from fraying. I want to make sure I get that real well sealed. So we're going to want to come back and glue that into place. I'm just going to run right along that line. Get that good and glued in there. All the way down to there. Then we'll just pull that back out away from there so it doesn't stick. And we'll do this same thing on these sides over here. Then we'll take our scissors and we'll cut our nice neat line right across that mark that we've put there. Then we're able just to roll that back just a little bit. Go ahead and run a glue line across through there. And just go ahead and glue that right on over. Then when we glue that over, we can go ahead and come around the bottom side just a little bit more, get plenty of glue on that seam. Want to be careful not to run your glue past the edge of your apex of your tube where your fabric lays, so that stays nice and neat. Make sure you don't have the glue running. Keep this real nice and neat because this is your finished finished glue seam. I'm just going to lightly rub across there, make sure that edge got over real well. Don't have any wrinkles in it anywhere. Looks fine. So I'm going to go ahead and take my pencil and we're going to go ahead and start getting this seam ready right here. Just like that. Just like that. We'll just go ahead and finish that up right on out here to the end. And this out here we're going to do some trimming on later. So I'll go ahead and glue these right quick while I'm right here. Same way as the other side. A little layer of glue right across through there. Just go ahead and roll that back off there so it doesn't stick. I'm going to go ahead and glue up through here a little bit where I know I'm going to cut that later. Okay, we're sealed up. Flip that off of that so it doesn't stick. Then we should be dry enough in here to go ahead and trim this line. I'm just going to get right on my pencil mark. I usually just leave my thumb hanging through the scissors. Get them in a spot they like to cut well. Hold a little tension on this side. And just work a nice neat line right down to the other end. I went ahead and stopped short there because I want that to lap up as far as I can around that. And we go ahead and just move this little guy in a little bit and start working this seam. So we're just going to glue from here to just right there. Go ahead and get that laying down. Might have to work on that a little bit, so we'll stop there. I want this to lay up here nice and neat. Get that to stay. It starts getting a little tacky on your fingers, just go ahead and stop. Or you'll start fraying that fabric out. Then we'll go ahead and finish that on up to there. Go ahead and run past the edge of your seam. Make sure we catch any runs we have underneath here. And you can see the way that seam finishes out. It ends up with a real nice, neat edge all the way down through there. Stopped short on that one because I knew I'd have a little problem up in that top edge. Get plenty of glue down in here. And then this one, our fabric's on just a little bit of a bias, so it'll lay down nicely for you. Even if it looks like it may have a few bad spots in it, you'll find out by the time you get to the other end that it all just falls right into place. Unless your glue brush gets a little too dry, then it'll hang up on it and pull it. You don't want to do that. So we're reaching right up underneath. We're getting everything glued down nice. If anything looks a little dry, go ahead and add a little extra glue in there. And then we'll come back with an iron after this dries, and see a little tiny little wrinkle right there. We'll just heat that out of it. We'll touch down any edges that didn't want to stick. Just like that. And we'll go ahead and get this one right here. Just like that. Now I'm going to do the same on these two sides right here, and then we'll get back to finishing up these ends on the other parts of the vertical. I've gone through and we've finished this seam in here. You can see how neat that is. It's just beyond the fabric rivet line. I went ahead and finished these out through here. Finish the bottom edge here. Our fabric's already heated to 250 where we lined it up before we rolled this over. And now we're ready to finish out these corners. Now what we're going to do on them, we're going to take our shoe iron and we're going to just heat around the edge and start to shrink that around in a curve. Just like that. And I've already glued this when we were doing this, finishing them out earlier. I glued around that edge to keep that from fraying. Now what I'm going to do is take my scissors and I'm going to trim that, leaving about 1/8 of an inch of overhang that I can wrap over the edge. So I'm just going to kind of just trim that around like that. And then when I get down to this bottom edge right here, I'm going to snip that back to the apex of the tube, or right to that edge. That way I can shrink this around, and then I can bring this piece up and cover the end back over. So seeing as how this has already been glued and this has glue on it, we can just heat this around that edge. And we want to try and get as few wrinkles in that as possible. So we actually want to shrink the fabric as we go, and you can help it along with your fingers. And while we're pulling that over, we're going to heat a little tension up on this piece of fabric under here and get it nice and tight. And then that finishes around real nice and neat like that. So from the front edge you can see that that's just a nice smooth edge through there. Then we'll take this piece of fabric and pull it over the end, and we'll glue that into place. Just going to slide my brush right back inside of there. And I'm going to run just a little bit more glue around this outside edge because we're going to lap that over just a little bit. Just smooth that out right there. We've got good wet glue in there, so we'll just go ahead and pull that on across there. And just rub that right in like that. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut the excess off the end of that. And we need to let that glue set up before we trim and iron that around the front edge, so we'll go ahead and start on these while we're waiting on that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get our shoe iron and just kind of tighten that up around that edge there just a little bit. There'll probably be a little bit of slack in it from where we wrapped our fabric over. So we'll just tighten that up a little bit. Right through there. And then again, this has already been pre-glued. So we can take our scissors leaving about an 1/8 inch hanging over. We'll just start trimming that. Start trimming that right around that edge. Then we'll pull it down into here and we'll snip it right back to that bottom apex edge of that tube again, right in here. And then we'll go ahead and iron all this over. We'll start out around the edge, start shrinking that. Got our iron set at about 350 degrees. So that'll shrink real nice for us. And just go ahead and just roll that right up in there. Just like that. And we'll get our glue. We'll slide it in behind here and get that real nice and wetted up. And we'll pull this piece of fabric right around the front, just like that. And you can see when we're wrapping this up that where we cut that to under here, that's going to be your finish edge. Just get that to where that'll lay on in there. Just leave that one alone. We'll start again right here. So we'll pull this little guy up just like this. We can go ahead and snip some of this extra fabric off here. We won't need it for anything. We'll get our iron. We'll go ahead and start shrinking that around through there. Sticking that down. Usually a little bit of excess fabric right here where you wrap your seam around. It doesn't always pull tight, but you can iron all that out of there.
Hello.
Then start shrinking this back. I've got some extra fabric right here I want to get rid of. We'll just keep ironing that around till we get rid of all that extra fabric there. You can see the way that's shrinking up and cleaning up real nice. Start pulling it all the way from the other side if you need to. I'll turn my iron up just a little bit more. I need to get a little bit more of those wrinkles out of there. Waiting on this iron to heat up just a little bit more. Just like that. Then again, we'll go ahead and trim this. Again, leaving just about an 1/8 inch. And one more time right back to the apex of that tube. Right there. Just like that. Come back and clean that up a little bit. And then we'll come in and iron that right over. Just like that. Get around that inside edge. You're not going to get all of the wrinkles out of this because it's such a steep curve. but it's going to cover over with this other piece of fabric, and that's going to make it look awesome. Plus the other bonus to that part right there is it's actually touching the boom tube when it's installed, so it will absolutely never be seen again. We'll pre-glue up in there, pull our fabric across, finish up that seam, trim off a little more excess material so it doesn't want to pull it over. Just like that. Okay. Now our glue's had time to set up right here, so we're going to trim around this edge, and we're just going to leave a real neat little 1/8 inch line around through there, because this is going to show on the outside. So you can see the way I've trimmed that I'm leaving just a neat little edge sticking out through there. And we're going to iron that down. You get our shoe iron again. Come in here and go ahead and start sticking anything that's not down solid. And then we'll start just drawing back toward us around that edge. Draw around toward you on that edge. And we'll just keep drawing that, and we're actually trying to shrink the fabric as we're coming around. Shrink the fabric as you come around, because you don't want any wrinkles in this. I'll get that to lay down real nice and flat. Then you can go ahead and put your iron right down on it. Finish that right out. Just like that. Right on up the front edge. And once you get that over, just go ahead and run another little wet glue around the edge right there. And just smooth that out, and you have a very neat tip down through there. Let that set up just a little bit, and then you can take your shoe iron, and you can see we got a little wrinkle right there. That's actually in the tape that's underneath the fabric, but the fabric will shrink down tight enough that it'll pull it right back down into place just like that. Then we want to take this end here where we've just glued it and just lightly heat that to smooth that out. Smooth that out. Then that's as tight as a drum right there. Then we can get our MEK rag. And we can go ahead and clean that up just a little bit. Don't take all your glue off, just clean it up a little bit. Where we rub that iron across the top of that glue, it'll roll up a little bit on you. And that's what we end up with right there. It's a nice neat corner. I'm going to do the same on this one. This top one, we'll go ahead and do one more together. We'll go ahead and finish this one right here out. It's had time to set up. So again, we're going to do a real neat little 1/8 inch line around that. Then just start rolling that over. Roll that over. And we're letting that fabric just take its time and shrink as we're going around to stick it. And then just stick it down just like that. Tighten this up through here. Got a little wrinkle right there. We'll go ahead and get rid of that. And that's real nice. So then we'll do the same thing again. Come back through, put a little more glue on that seam on the outside edge. Smooth that over where it's nice and neat. And I believe I'll take a little bit of MUK on my wet rag. And I'll just clean this up right through here just a little bit. Like that. Then we'll re-glue that trailing edge right in there like that. Just get that nice and wet. Catch any runs off of that. Smooth that out, and that'll soak right through there and stick everything down. And that's got us down to one more little piece to do. Let's just go ahead and do it together also. So we've glued our fabric across the bottom edge of that. Let's go ahead and get along the edge of it. Make sure everything's down right. Shrink that up a little bit. Real nice and neat. Take our scissors, trim an 1/8 inch. Just enough to lap over it. Loop back to the start. And you can see what I've got around that. We've got just not a little less than 1/8 of an inch around that. And then we'll just take that and just start laying it over. Just like that. This is probably where I see the most trouble in the covering jobs that I see out there, is figuring out how to finish, where to end the job at. And that's how it's done right there in my world. I don't know how the big professionals do it, but that's the way I do it. And I'm going to do the same thing there again. Come right around the outside edge of that. Just kind of double glue that seam down. This one's got a nice surface on the inside. Go ahead and clean it up just a little bit. And that's nice. Alright, that vertical stabilizer came out real nice. Right now we're ironed to 250 degrees. We're still going to have to come back in. We're going to have to burn these holes where our fabric rivets go. So we'll draw a little line of poly tack right across there, just real narrow, just enough to reinforce the fabric. We'll burn these holes through. Then we'll get a little bit of reinforcing tape about a 1/2 inch past this hole, and a 1/2 inch past that hole. We'll run our reinforcing tape over the top of it, burn through that, and then pop our fabric rivets in there. And then we'll put a little piece of finish tape right over that. And that would make that vertical stabilizer done as soon as you iron it up to its final temperature. Now, on the fuselage, we did our final temperature to 350 degrees. You can't quite reach 350 degrees with the heavier fabric on the Mark III vertical stabilizer, the rudders, ailerons, all the rest of the pieces except for the wings. I usually stop at just a little over 300 degrees, so I get almost final temp. But if you go too far, the structure on these will start to bow in just a little bit. So that's some pretty stout fabric on these planes. So I stop that temperature at about 300 degrees. And If it looks like it can take more, sometimes I'll turn it up to 325. Very rarely do I take these all the way to 350. A lot of times on the elevators and rudder, you can take them all the way to 350, but you have to watch and pay attention to what you're doing to make sure that you're not pulling them too far. The wings, you can take those all the way to 350 degrees. So I'm going to get back with you when we get ready to do our fabric riveting here. The next thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and iron this to 350 degrees, to 300 degrees, and do the final ironing on it. I'll go around and clean my edges up, and I'm going to get back with you, and I'm going to show you if you have any place that's glued over a little too far, how to fix that. So as soon as this sets up enough to iron it, I'll get back with you. We finished up our ends around here. I've gone back and I've ironed the fabric to 300 degrees. And man, everything looks awesome. I don't think I would tension it anymore. I'm starting to see just a little bit of a bow in the leading edge of this. So that's going to be the end of our shrinking. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our MEK rag, and you need to change this rag out from time to time because it starts to get filled with poly tack, and you want to keep it kind of clean so it doesn't seal the fabric along the edges. We've got our cup of MEK there, got our little rag. And what we're going to do now is we're going to check to make sure that we're not glued too far over the edge anywhere. So I just run this right along my edge, and you can see, I hope you can see that on the film, it soaks in, and you can actually see the straight edge of the tube on the other side. So you can just soak that MEK right down along that edge. And what you're shooting for is to see a nice straight uniform line down that seam. You can see the MEK rolling through there, and that lets you know that fabric is straight across that tube. So we're going to do that to all of our surfaces that we glued. Turn this right around here, and we'll soak it in right along this edge. And other than one little spot right here, what I do is tension it down just a little bit. Let that pop back up. And that MEK will turn that loose along that edge, and that looks good. And I can see that I have a nice uniform straight line all the way down through there. And I know that I didn't glue that over too far. So we'll wet our rag back up. We'll try this other side here. And it's perfect all the way through there. We like that. We'll flip this guy over and do the same thing to the other side. Now this side you have to be a little more careful with, because we have our seam is right here, so you don't want to wake the glue up in your seam. You want to get your rag folded up kind of neat. And try and just run just along that edge without getting in your seam. You can touch the seam a little because it doesn't hurt to clean it up. But I can see I've got a nice straight line there, and I will just go ahead and clean that back edge up just a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to shoot down along that edge. I'll watch that MEK soak in there. I can see my straight line. I'm going to clean that edge up. I'm going to run right down through there. And I'm going to do the same thing here. It really gives you an opportunity to kind of inspect your work. See how you did on not gluing too far over the edge. And that one looks good. And I'm soaking right along the edge of that. And that is a perfect straight line. Just going to kind of clean that edge up one time down through there. Don't rub that too many times. Just kind of knock down through there. Now we're gonna let this set up, let that MEK dry, and then I'm going to come back with my shoe iron In any place I've got a little tail hanging over like this right here, I'm gonna iron those over, trim them off. Any place you may have a little wrinkle in your fabric, it's a good time to take your 350-degree shoe iron and iron that out of there. I'm looking for one now. There we go, right here. I can see just 2 little wrinkles right there. This is already set up real nice. So you don't want to lay your iron on the seam or it'll pull it back, but as long as you stay away from it, you can pull those little wrinkles right out of there. And some of this stuff just plain old needs to be tightened up around where it comes off that edge there. Make sure all these edges are down nice. Down through those corners. And heat those up across through there. And right through there. This one actually looks close to perfect. That piece is ready to do our fabric riveting, a little bit of taping. Looks to me like it's done by a real professional. We'll run with it.